Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott.
Josh, my friend, this is easily one of the ugliest things we've ever had to report on. It's one of the most sickening things that I think has ever been really detailed that I've read, especially in the gaming industry, but it's not going to stop us shining a light on the thing, continuing the conversation around the most essential parts of the takeaway of this stuff. But we'll get to all that. You've got all the notes on what's happening, the central stories around Activision, the allegations that are going on in regards to sexual harassment, sexual abuse. There's some really horrific stuff in here involving someone taking their own life. It's really very, very ugly, but I think there is a core takeaway that needs to be addressed. But over to you, Josh Brown.
Totally. Before jumping into the suit as well, I just kind of want to echo what you just said there. Like, this is going to be like a very serious video. We're jumping into discussions about sexual harassment, suicide, like you said, like rape threats and rape jokes. So obviously, if people don't want to hear about all of that stuff, then I, obviously suggest you not to watch this because it might be, impactful and triggering and whatnot. But yeah, like you said, there's been a lawsuit filed by the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing against Activision Blizzard. That's, essentially brought up a bunch of really disturbing and really abhorrent accusations that essentially center around discrimination and harassment against women specifically in this company. And they've got a bunch of different details. And this was all conducted across a 2-year investigation by this, governmental body into Activision Blizzard. And like I said, they've, discovered all of these things, and they're claiming that there are essentially what they're describing as a frat boy culture within Activision Blizzard that perpetuates this harassment, that perpetuates this discrimination. Like, it's a lengthy document. Like, it's pages upon pages. It goes into it in great detail. We, don't have necessarily the time to go into everything today, so I'm just going to pick out a few things that have been doing the rounds, picked up, being around on Twitter, being picked up by other publications and stuff that essentially, highlight the kind of things we're talking about, highlight the severity of what's been alleged with all of, this stuff. First and foremost, like I said, it's this frat boy culture that's been apparently fostered within the company. The suit goes on to say that this culture has resulted in a reality where women have to, quote unquote, continually fend off unwanted sexual comments and advances by their male co-workers. Like I said, I'm not going to go into everything, but one of the specific things that is called out in this report is something called cube crawls, and as it's described in the suit, it claims, quote, "In the office, women are subjected to cube crawls, in which male employees drink copious amounts of alcohol, and they crawl their way through various cubicles in the office and often engage in inappropriate behavior towards female employees. Male employees proudly come into work hungover, play video games for long periods of time during work while delegating their responsibilities to female employees, engage in banter about their sexual encounters, talk openly about female bodies, and joke about rape." It goes on to say, quote, "As a product of this frat boy culture, women were subjected to numerous sexual comments and advances, groping and unwanted physical touching, and other forms of harassment." That's obviously, incredibly serious stuff, incredibly awful working environments. But one of the main issues is that when this stuff was reported, reported to supervisors, reported to HR, the lawsuit claims that nothing was done about it, essentially. Apparently, it was either just ignored or it continued to be encouraged. It goes on to say that, quote, "This behavior was known to supervisors and indeed encouraged by them, including a male supervisor openly encouraging a male subordinate to buy a prostitute to cure his bad mood." So
great.
The idea is that essentially, I'll pause right this second because I think we need to take most of this stuff slow. But yeah, so like the first part of this is that there are all of these allegations that, there's this frat boy atmosphere, all of these things are happening. And at the same time, when this stuff has been reported, the suit alleges that nothing was done to truly, get to the heart of it, to truly change anything, to make this working environment, a working environment, to run professionally, to run for the safety of the people on the other end of all of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, another example to throw in here, because I mean, the thing is, the whole frat boy culture thing, it's not to make this a wider societal commentary video, but obviously the vast majority, if not all men, will know exactly what sort of mentality we're talking about. And 9 times out of 10, 99% of the time, you'll know someone who's been like that. You'll have been around someone like that. So it's not like there aren't applicable reference points for this stuff. And obviously, a whole bunch of female friends that I've got, even my wife, people like that. People have had interactions with this mentality and these approaches to the degradation of women. And it's, like I said, it's not a rare thing. And I think when you find out that it's happening in the games industry, it shouldn't shock you that much because it is such a widespread thing. But there is also that reality when things come out like this, where, everyone's obviously horrified by it, shocked by it, sickened by it. And Alana Pierce, who is, the ex-IGN reporter, she now writes for Sony Santa Monica, she got out on stream and just literally said that, to be honest, reading the amount of the shock to this stuff, in effect kind of was jarring to her because it's such common knowledge to her. And her video on this stuff is really, really sad. She just sort of goes through a lot of the stuff that she's also been through, which very much lines up with what we're describing here. Describing this old place that she used to work for, doesn't name them for obvious reasons, but just says that, she was repeatedly groped, grabbed, people were trying to forcibly kiss her without her permission, people trying to put shots of alcohol down her throat without her permission, and she's repeatedly telling people, leave me alone, get the F away from me, get the F off me and stuff, reported it to HR, and the only thing that happened with HR in that case was that they sent an email immediately around the entire office naming her, saying Alana is not comfortable in the workplace or at work events, which is obviously the worst way to go about it. I mentioned at the beginning that I think there has to be an overall takeaway from this stuff, which is exactly what Alana said, and I think that it's important for as many women as possible to talk about this stuff, is that she says that, the overall thing is just to try and foster a mentality of stepping in when these things are happening, and it doesn't need to be, stepping forward and going like, oh, excuse me, let's get super formal about this. This is harassment in the workplace and making it, ostensibly kind of weird. She's just saying there is absolutely a way to step in for men and women or whoever, especially men, to step in and just go, come on, man, like this isn't okay, dude, you need to step away or whatever, and encourage more of that stuff. So that's what I was getting at the beginning. I think Alana's video you should absolutely check out because I think seeing someone who is as recognizable in the industry very much saying, look, this is incredibly common, and when this stuff comes out, even to the regards of, we haven't even touched upon yet, the tragic loss of life with someone taking their own life because of what happened, her just saying that even going to that regard, she read that and just went, well, of course, because you go through it day in, day out, that it wasn't necessary, it's horrifying, it's ugly, but the realities of what she's lived through, and lots of her friends have lived through, and different women in the gaming industry, that's something that could have happened because she's already been through a lot of things like that. So it's horrible. Like, it's absolutely the ugliest, most sickening thing. And like I said, there are reference points across the board, but when you read about them like this, I think it drives it home in a way that should hopefully make as many people as possible take as much action as possible in the most reasonable way.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we're talking specifically about these allegations against Activision Blizzard today, but, if you look even over the past few years, this kind of like mentality, this kind of atmosphere, this kind of behavior, especially from men towards women, that's, it's cropped up in a bunch of different, anonymous sources, a bunch of different allegations leveled at other studios. Obviously, last year we had everything with Ubisoft. Before then, it was like David Cage and Quantic Dream. There were a bunch of allegations against that studio. And there are similarities across the board, like you said, about the Alana video there. It's this thing that crops up in this, male employees and often people in a position of power, supervisors, managers and stuff like that, like you said, trying to grow up women, trying to force themselves, force kisses and stuff like that, and all of this like really sexual harassment, all of these specific behaviors of sexual harassment that keep popping up over and over again, and it kind of like keeps blowing up, and nothing necessarily is kind of being done in a big way to address that yet. But I just want to kind of like continue with what else is in this document, because there is so much. We've covered, the sexual harassment element of it right now. And I just kind of want to go into what you said at the end a bit more there. There is, an allegation in here, apparently, that one of the female employees died by suicide on a business trip. And according to, this entire report, it says that essentially that the sexual harassment encountered at the workplace contributed, to that death. Obviously, an incredibly huge accusation there, and definitely one that people are looking at and taking away and just kind of being gobsmacked by in a way. On top of the sexual harassment, there are the big part of the document focuses on just the general discrimination against women in the workplace, generally when it comes to opportunities, when it comes to equal pay. Apparently, they've, worthy, in a professional sense, hit their milestones, have performed better in their jobs, better than their male counterparts when it comes to, like those specific women. There are a bunch of examples highlighted about people being passed over for promotions, people not getting the pay they deserved. There was one specific example of this marketing employee who apparently generated more money, generated more campaigns, and had higher performance reviews than a male counterpart who subsequently he was promoted over her and stuff like that. And they said that, apparently there's this culture allegedly of the higher ups being accused of essentially promoting their male friends and kind of like getting them into positions of power rather than looking at who deserves, in terms of work that they put in, the actual promotions. I think it's incredibly important to note before I go on as well that the suit makes it very clear that women of color specifically are particularly vulnerable in this workplace. They are allegedly, like exactly what I said, they're allegedly particularly vulnerable targets for everything that we've just talked about. So obviously there's an element of, racism that comes in there as well, on top of the general kind of like sexism and stuff.
Alana mentioned in her video that in terms of the mentality that we're sort of like driving at that needs to be addressed, needs to be encountered, it needs to be interrupted more. She was saying that in regards to her experience, it feels like this mentality of former sort of nerds, former people who were sort of at the bottom of the rung during school, during a whole chunk of their life, that now suddenly get positions of power, that now suddenly are above certain people in the industry, in the gaming industry, and now it feels like they are owed all the women in their vicinity. And that's something that they think they are due, and that's where a lot of this sort of mentality comes from. That was the way that she was trying to think of it, and obviously I can't speak to that because I haven't been through it myself. But I think that it's still a reality of something to point to in terms of where does this mentality come from. It needs to be something that carries on past this video, past these statements, past this report. But there's something here. Because like you've said, it's across the board, but in gaming especially, it does go across Ubisoft, Quantic Dream. There was a whole bunch of tweets that came out about Insomniac last year. And now we've got this stuff with Activision Blizzard. So there's something here in regards to these specific mentalities of people who go into gaming and then become whatever this is on the other side of it.
Totally, and it's I guess across all of those cases that you point out, again, they're all, you have to say allegedly because a lot of these cases are still ongoing. But yeah, like the general common theme is that just like the lack of accountability, the lack of people in those positions that can do something, failing to do something. I recommend everyone going to read the full court case, if they get time, to fully understand everything that's being alleged, everything that's being claimed. I could only touch upon so much here, but I do want to include Activision Blizzard's statement. They have released a kind of response to this whole thing coming out, and again, you can go read the whole thing, but for the most part, they say, quote, "The DFEH includes distorted and in many cases false descriptions of Blizzard's past." They went on to say, quote, "We have been extremely cooperative with the DFEH throughout their investigation, including providing them with extensive data and ample documentation, but they refused to inform us of what issues they perceived." They went on to also say that the company, quote, "fosters a workplace that offers inclusivity for everyone," and apparently they mentioned that changes have been made since the investigation was initially kind of like conducted to, quote, "reflect more diversity within our leadership team." So that's their official kind of response to all this.
Okay.
But yeah, essentially like that's what's happening. This is obviously like a huge deal, like you said. It's a knock-on effect. This is one of many cases like this that have come out over the past few years. And while it's all good and well, listening to me and you talk about it, like you said before, at the end of the day, we're a couple of dudes. We haven't, encountered this in the same way. So I would encourage people to go out and check out the videos and the, reports and the write-ups and the tweets of, women in the games industry, especially women of color, like this document alleges. Like they have it, they're particularly vulnerable. So, it's good listening to us about it, but definitely go out and check out the writings and the opinions of people who are more directly impacted by this than, me and you are, like you said, with the Alana Pierce video and everything else.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it speaks to a much wider problem, and this is just one of the touching points on addressing it overall. But I think any step in the right direction is a step in the right direction. Like, hopefully, it just feels like it's something that needs to be talked about way more. I kind of, watching the Alana video, I kind of couldn't believe that hadn't been voiced beforehand. It just seems like such a nakedly horrific thing to go through. And obviously, in this regard, like I said, there's, we're dealing with the suicide of an employee who, again, it's allegedly and everything else, but that is it's a cause and effect thing. So it's like there are realities that need to be addressed. And I think that it is just this horrific thing that right now we can talk about it through the lens of the gaming industry, but it is something that just needs to be talked about overall going forward. So I mean, chime in down in the comments below, let us know what you think. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
And we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.